Welcome, everyone. I'm Errol Barnett, in for Vlad Dutier, who is on assignment in Florida right now. This is a special edition of CBS News 24/7. Of course, we are covering the major hurricane, which at this point is just hours from making landfall. And take a look at it. It's massive. Our weather radar there showing that Milton is on a track to strike central Florida. It will take the brunt of the impact. Parts of the Gulf Coast could see a storm surge up to 15 feet. That's not inches, feet. Officials urging everyone that this is a life or death situation. In fact, this part of Florida has sent out, it could be the biggest thing they've seen in a century. And you're looking at police in Treasure Island. They're not far from Tampa, and they're patrolling the streets to warn people who are still there to get out. And we have this recent video into us from Fort Myers, but it's a scene you're seeing across the area. Storefronts boarded up to protect as many places as possible. And we want to give you now a live look at Tallahassee. We are awaiting for an update on the storm response from Governor Ron DeSantis. And of course, as soon as he begins to speak, we will take you there live. CBS News correspondent Jonathan Vigliotti is also standing by for us in Tampa, Florida. Jonathan, we know this is dangerous. It could, in fact, be deadly. Explain to us what you're seeing as people prepare for the worst.
Yeah, and good morning to you, Errol. This storm, when it does make impact, no matter where it makes impact along this coast, will change the face of this coast. We're starting to feel the outer bands of Milton as it approaches. Some light rain right now. The rain will begin to pick up later this afternoon. We're anticipating landfall anywhere between the hours of 9 p.m. to 2 a.m. Thursday. Already, I can tell you, even with this light rain, we're starting to see some cases of light flooding because of clogged drains, clogged with debris from Hurricane Helene, which hit this area just 2 weeks ago. In fact, this community, Davis Island in Tampa, was in the process of cleaning up from that storm when it had to drop everything and prepare to evacuate. In terms of evacuations, the mayor here in Tampa is saying that window is quickly expiring. Just from my perspective, I would say for anyone in this area that has chosen not to evacuate, you probably have about 3 hours to make a decision and then make a plan to get out. About 3 million people in this area alone, part of that mandatory evacuation. Many have heeded those warnings. We saw I-75 yesterday, the day before, clogged with bumper-to-bumper traffic. A lot of people trying to escape up north. I spoke with one woman who spent 16 hours driving from here in Tampa to Tallahassee, a drive that should normally take 4 hours. The threats are many. Many familiar, some are new. Let's start with the familiar. You mentioned the storm surge, anywhere from 10 to 15 feet. It's been downgraded here in Tampa to about 12 feet. But to put that in perspective, you see the homes behind me. Look at the first story. That's where this water can come up to with that storm surge. Then you have the incredible amount of rain Milton is packing. We're talking in a short period of time when this storm makes landfall as much as 16 inches. So you're going to get flash flooding. Then you're going to have wind sustained at more than 100 miles per hour. To the new threat, and this is something that we were looking at yesterday, and it goes back to Helene. All of the debris from that cleanup scattered across streets for miles. We were at one mound of debris. It was about 2 stories high. It took up an entire parking lot. Now imagine adding wind to that. It all turns into deadly projectiles. Very dangerous here. The time to evacuate is now, Errol.
Folks need to listen to that warning. Jonathan Vigliotti, you and the team stay safe. Thank you for that report. We want to now cross over to the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, and its administrator giving us an update. Ready. Let's listen.
Our agency is postured to respond to this storm and help the state of Florida. And I have been providing regular updates to President Biden and Vice President Harris as Milton gets closer. They have directed me to do everything possible to be there for Floridians in the coming days. Now, a little bit more about Hurricane Helene. I have been on the ground here in North Carolina for over a week now, and I have had a great partnership with Governor Cooper and his team. I have been incredibly impressed by their tireless work to support North Carolinians impacted by Hurricane Helene. We continue to support the governor's priorities, including search and rescue operations, clearing roads to reach isolated and limited access communities, and delivering commodities directly into the hands of survivors. We also have hundreds of FEMA personnel and thousands of federal responders on the ground going door to door to get assistance to survivors who need it.
We'll continue listening into this FEMA update, but we now want to get you to Tallahassee, Florida. Governor Ron DeSantis providing an update on Hurricane Milton.
To prepare and respond to Hurricane Helene, and then now to prepare and respond to this new major hurricane. The common virtue has been dedication. Dedication to the task at hand, dedication to responding to help our fellow Floridians in danger, and dedication to ensuring that Florida weathers this storm and emerges stronger on the other side. We are prepared and we will respond. I've spoken to the president. We remain in regular contact with FEMA, and we are marshaling all available resources to be able to prepare and respond to Hurricane Milton. I also want to thank the 20 other states who are assisting Florida ahead of the storm. This is just what we as Americans do. We've had opportunities to help other states in the past, including most recently in Western North Carolina, and I think it shows the spirit that these states are stepping up and providing really valued support. We still have a state of emergency for 51 Florida counties. Hurricane Milton is still a major, very strong hurricane. It's currently a Category 4 hurricane with maximum sustained winds of 155 miles per hour. That is just a whisker shy of a Category 5. And while there is the hope that it will weaken more before landfall, there is high confidence that this hurricane is going to pack a major, major punch and do an awful lot of damage. As you can see behind me, the Florida Division of Emergency Management is fully deployed, fully active. This has been a footing now for over 2 weeks, given both of these storms. The state is actively fulfilling over 1,500 missions. We've delivered massive amounts of supplies, meals, water bottles, sandbags, tarps, generators to be able to help our local communities respond to this storm. We've also deployed more than 11,000 feet of flood protection systems and erected them around critical infrastructure like hospitals, wastewater treatment facilities, and electric infrastructure. Generators have been deployed at shelters and to support sheltering operations. Starlink Internet has been deployed across the entire state of Florida. We have surged an additional 600 ambulances, and they are currently in operation helping in the effort. The state of Florida has considerable fuel reserves ahead of Milton, and it's staged, and they will be utilized as needed following the storm. We've already dispatched a lot of fuel in the lead up to this, but we still have on hand 1.6 million gallons of diesel and 1.1 million gallons of gasoline. There is no, right now, fuel shortage. However, demand has been extraordinarily high, and some gas stations have run out. To be able to help ameliorate that, the Florida Highway Patrol has facilitated 106 long-distance fuel tanker escorts with sirens getting through traffic, totaling almost 1 million gallons of gasoline from ports in Tampa, Jacksonville, Everglades, and Manatee, and they are continuing with the fuel escorts as we speak. I'm in contact with the ports on the west coast of Florida. We'll see how this storm impacts those. Clearly, there's a chance that you could have a major impact on Port Manatee as well as on Port Tampa Bay. That could interrupt their ability to receive fuel shipments. And so we're working on contingencies to be able to keep fuel flowing throughout the state of Florida. As we saw this new storm develop, it was clear that a lot of the hardest hit areas on the west coast of Florida from Hurricane Helene had not had major, robust debris removal contracts in place or operations in place. Some of these contractors were good. Some of them were not getting the job done. So you had a major hazard on barrier islands in Pinellas, Manatee, and Sarasota County. So this weekend, I authorized mandated 24/7 debris removal. We took all the Florida Department of Transportation and other agency vehicles, brought them from all across the state, and they are engaged in other missions as their normal course of business and dedicated it to debris removal. So in a little over 48 hours, and they were working all through the night in the wee hours of the morning in places like Manatee, Sarasota, and Pinellas. They were able to remove 55,000 cubic yards of debris. So that's over 3,000 truckloads of debris. And it's our estimation that on those barrier islands, they were able to make a dent in the debris and reduce it by about 50% just from what Jared Perdue and the other agencies were able to get done. So I want to thank everybody that's been involved in that. It did not stop since this weekend. We're now in a position where it's likely the conditions are going to deteriorate, and so we're going to have to wind that down. But they did make a difference, and there will be less damage from this storm as a result of getting that debris out than there otherwise would have been. The Florida Department of Transportation is staging the following assets ahead of the storm: 156 bridge inspectors, 328 cut and toss personnel, and over 1,500 pieces of heavy equipment. Florida National Guard, Florida State Guard, Florida Fish and Wildlife, and the Florida Highway Patrol have activated additional personnel in advance of the storm. We have hundreds of state search and rescue personnel on hand, 26 total teams. They are currently embedded in the potential impact sites along the West Coast to begin immediate rescue operations as soon as the storm passes. The National Guard is deploying 6,000 Florida National Guardsmen, as well as 3,000 National Guardsmen from other states, and so we thank for the support on that. We have 34 search and rescue aircraft, and that includes some of the aircraft that have been brought in from other states. We have 500 tactical vehicles, including 180 high water vehicles, aerial, water, and ground National Guard search and rescue teams. This is the largest Florida National Guard search and rescue mobilization in the entire history of the state of Florida. Our Florida State Guard is also deploying almost 200 soldiers, 10 maritime crews, 3 high water UTVs, 2 UH-60 Black Hawk helicopters, 4 drone teams, 15 cut and toss crews, 2 amphibious rescue crews. We want to thank them. I mean, this was just a dream a couple years ago that they would be involved, and there was a lot of unfair criticism when we stood it up, but they have made a huge difference in this hurricane season. They're going to continue to do it here. We have also worked with the utilities to have the largest staging of utility workers and linemen in advance of the storm any time in American history. We will have in Florida, by the time the storm arises, over 50,000 linemen. And those linemen are being brought in from places as far away as California. So as soon as that storm passes, you're going to see the assessments and the power restoration efforts commence immediately. Additionally, the state of Florida has assisted with the evacuation of 352 healthcare facilities in the potential path of the storm. 16 hospitals have been evacuated. The state veteran nursing homes are currently located that are in the cone, are all accepting families of their residents to shelter with them. All of those are hurricane proof. All of them are outside of flood zones. So if you do have a family member that's in one of our state nursing homes, you can go and you can shelter with them. That's a safe option, and I know the veterans would appreciate it. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement is directing deployment of additional 500 out-of-state law enforcement officers. These officers will help respond after the storm to maintain law and order. And there is going to be a lot of damage from this storm. There's going to be opportunities for people to try to take advantage of that. My message to you is don't even think about it. We are going to come down hard on you. You are not going to be, you're going to regret that you tried to do that. So I appreciate all the other folks from out of state who are coming in to supplement this effort. We need to maintain law and order. FDLE's mutual aid team is managing more than 70 active law enforcement missions, including identifying post-storm response squads, and these are really important missions, and we're happy for that. So we're preparing for Milton, but we're also still recovering from Hurricane Helene. When Hurricane Helene hit, we reactivated the Florida Disaster Fund. We are now accepting donations into the Florida Disaster Fund for both storms, both Helene and for Milton. This is a private fund. It's affiliated with the state in terms of disaster, but it's tax deductible donations. We distributed $63 million after Hurricane Ian to help people largely in Southwest Florida. This is something that is really, really important. So I've directed Volunteer Florida to keep the fund activated for Hurricane Milton. I want to thank, there's already been millions raised for Helene. I want to thank Lennar, Wells Fargo, Walmart, and Publix for making really significant donations. And I know there's going to be a lot more that are going to want to do it. To contribute to the Florida Disaster Fund, you can text disaster to 20222. Disaster to 20222, or you can visit floridadisasterfund.org. So now we're bearing down to where the storm is going to arrive within the next 24 hours. You still have time to evacuate if you are in an evacuation zone, particularly if you're in Manatee, Sarasota, Charlotte, those areas. I mean, this track can bounce around. It's not guaranteed it's going to hit there. A lot of the solutions have it going there. You have time to do that. Now, conditions aren't going to be great today. I would say that the roads and the interstates, they are flowing. We've waived tolls. We've done all that so people can do. But the best option would probably be just to evacuate within your own county to one of the shelters. All those counties have multiple shelters that are open. There's a lot of space in those shelters right now, and certainly it would be safe to do a very short evacuation, tens of miles, rather than get on the interstate and go. The roads are still open. People can do that, but I just want to warn people that the conditions are likely going to continue to deteriorate throughout the course of the day. We had, of course, on Monday, when the initial evacuations were coming down, particularly in the Tampa Bay area, had a lot of traffic on I-4 and on I-75. FDOT did the emergency shoulder plan. That helped, but it was slow, and those roads can be very slow anyways. By the time we got to the end of the night, through the wee hours of the morning, it was going pretty quickly. Yesterday was not as bad on those roads as it was on Monday, but what we did see is Alligator Alley down in southern Florida was about 150% of its normal capacity, and I think that's because as people saw the storm potentially bending a little further south, I think a lot of people in Southwest Florida decided to evacuate across the state, and so that's that. The roads now are good, but I would just caution the conditions are not great now, and they're likely going to get worse as the day goes on. Of course, we do have a lot of mandatory evacuations in place. If you want to get a hotel, you can go to visitflorida.com/Priceline, Expedia.com/Florida. That is the emergency accommodation module that is there. I'm not sure what availability there's going to be in a lot of these places at this point, but if that's something that you're interested in, you can try that. Of course, we've worked with the Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association for distress rates for hotels as well as.
All right, we've heard some of the big headlines there from Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida saying that while now you do still have a chance to evacuate from what will be some of the hardest hit areas, conditions will deteriorate. They've already started to get worse, and they will continue to do so for the rest of the day. We also heard him reference that while they are as prepared as possible, including having the largest deployment of the Florida National Guard in the state's history, that there still will be a serious and strong hurricane when it makes landfall. Let's now cross over and speak with someone doing what they can to help residents be safe. The mayor of Largo, Florida, is joining us now, Woody Brown. And where you are, Mayor, is right next to Tampa. You're north of Sarasota. You're sitting in between effectively two bodies of water. You've got the Gulf on one side of you. You've got Tampa Bay on the other side. I want to ask you about shelters, if anyone is even left in your town, because the governor there said that they are making sure generators get to shelters where you are. So how prepared do you feel right now?
Everything we can. We've got a few hours left of preparation time. If you're in an evacuation zone or in a mobile home, we urge you to get out. Our shelters in the county are reaching capacity, but we still have room, and there's still ways to get there even if you need transportation. So now's the time. That window is going to shut in a few hours. We've been spending the last week cleaning up from Helene, so there's still a lot of stuff around town from that. We had about 160 homes that had major damage from Helene, either stormwater or wind. and it's only going to be worse in the next 24 hours. So if you're here and you're not leaving, make sure that you're out of an evacuation zone in a structure that's designed to handle it. And our team is going home right now to rest, with the exception of the people picking up debris still. And they'll be staging, coming back to our team camp to wait for this to pass so we can start clearing the roads and getting people back to their places.
Yeah, it appears that there's been 4 days of at least preparedness for this massive hurricane, and you are staying with your team to kind of have a home base and a camp to help people. But for those not in Florida, help us understand who these people are who decide to stay and ride these things out. I mean, to some extent, people in Florida are used to major storms. They're used to powerful hurricanes. They know what to do. And not everyone has the luxury of driving a few hours out, taking their pets and animals and uprooting themselves. From what you can tell, how many people are going to ride this out, and why are they doing so?
Well, a lot of people have lived here most of their life, like myself, and we've seen a lot of warnings in the past, but nothing's hit us directly. So I think they're just resilient. Yeah, it's tough to say.
It sounds like what you're telling me is that for people from here who've always lived here, they kind of take these things personally, and they don't want to leave their homes, the place they love, where they've grown up.
Absolutely, and you know, if you leave, we tell people that the best evacuation is a place that's high and dry, that's ready for the wind, that's only 4 miles, you know, close to your house. Right now, I'm sitting about 65 feet above sea level, so we're not going to get storm surge here. We're not likely going to be inundated with rainwater here. So this is a good place to evacuate if you're going to stay in the county. Folks don't want to leave their belongings and go 10 hours away and then not be able to get back for weeks. And that's the real challenge. A lot of people have seen warnings in this area over and over again, and the storms have gone south and hit Charlotte Harbor with Charlie, and this one's going to hit us. It's going to hit us or just south of us, and we're going to get 100-mile-an-hour winds for hours on end, and a lot of rain. We're on the wet side of the storm. Our ground is saturated from a wet August and Hurricane Helene, and then Debbie before that. So we don't have the ground, you know, we don't have the capacity in our stormwater to handle hours and hours of rain.
Yeah, Mayor Woody Brown, we appreciate you spending some of this important day with us. You're getting the message out that people have a little bit of time left to evacuate, but I think folks can be reassured that you and your team will be there to help those in need in the days ahead. And of course, an open invite to stay in contact with us as things continue. Mayor, thank you for your time.
Thank you for helping us get the message out.
Yeah, of course. We want to continue to do that. Let's go ahead and bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with an update on Milton's track and just how powerful this storm is right now. Grant, we have to remember that this is personal for a lot of Floridians.
It's personal. It's very difficult to leave, especially in this part of the country where they have seen some of the more significant storms kind of curve away, go north, go south. This one looks like it's going to take that direct perpendicular hit somewhere across the west central coast of the Florida Gulf Coast here. Errol, let me tell you about this. 155-mile-per-hour winds. This storm is just shy of being a Category 5 hurricane. So significant storm right now. It's moving quickly to the northeast at 16 miles per hour. The pressure is rising, which is that indication that we are seeing it weakening. But still, even as a low-end Cat 4, high-end Category 3, it's still a major hurricane that will bring potentially catastrophic damage to not just the coast of Florida, but well inland as well. Currently, it's about 210 miles southwest of Tampa, Florida right now. So the necessity to wrap up every preparation needs to be done. 23.6 million people underneath some sort of tropical storm watch, tropical storm warning, or hurricane warning, which is what stretches across the entire central part of the Florida Peninsula. They are beginning to see some of the rain. In fact, one of the initial rain bands with those gustier tropical storm force winds is approaching the coast. Right now, we're finding wind gusts there in Venice, Florida, around 35 miles per hour. Let me show you the latest forecast track. We'll talk more about surge in a bit, Errol, but still expected to make landfall overnight tonight into early tomorrow morning, potentially as a Category 4 storm, and then maintain strength as it goes across the state before moving into the Atlantic as we go into Thursday afternoon and Friday morning. Errol, back to you for now.
So many different types of risk. We'll check back in with you soon. Grant Gilmore, thank you. Now, the Biden administration is pre-positioning personnel ahead of Hurricane Milton and expediting debris removal, which is already underway in the southeast after Hurricane Helene. The president directed his team to do everything possible to save lives. Let's bring in CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Zhang with more on that. Weijia, what is the White House saying as of this hour ahead of Milton's landfall?
Well, Errol, that effort also includes having FEMA trying to help people get to safety, especially if they need medical assistance. There are hundreds of federal workers on the ground there doing that right now. And we know that President Biden has been briefed by his team, and he will receive another formal briefing this afternoon. And then he will make remarks to the American public. But he delivered extensive remarks yesterday, Errol. He said that he's been in touch with the governor of Florida, who's been very cooperative. He's been in touch with local officials as well. And his message to people is to listen to them, that if there are evacuation orders, to leave, because the president says this is a matter of life and death. He also talked about the misinformation that is spreading from some figures, including the former president. And President Biden said that this is dangerous, it's un-American, and that people are already scared to death. And so, it's only contributing to the problem. As far as resources go, the president says that the federal government is ready to provide whatever assistance that the states need. He says that the governors that he's been in contact with say that they've so far received everything that they have asked for when it comes to preparing for this hurricane. But certainly they will be prepared also to help in the aftermath, because, Errol, as you've been reporting all morning, the president says this is going to be a storm of a century for this part of Florida.
That's exactly right. You may survive the storm, but there are many life-threatening aspects after the storm, whether it's the floodwaters, the pollution, the lack of electricity. I want to quickly switch gears and ask you about an important call for the president today. He is reportedly set to speak with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. What can we learn about that?
Errol, when I spoke with President Biden last week and I asked him about the many times in recent weeks that he has said he plans to speak to Prime Minister Netanyahu, he said that it would likely happen after Israel had made a decision about how to respond in retaliation to those Iranian strikes on Israel. So this could be a situation where Netanyahu is briefing President Biden about its plans. And of course, the concern is a wider war, is an escalation of tensions, because if Israel delivers a significant response, then the big question becomes, will Iran do something in exchange for that, and how widespread could this go? In addition to that, we expect they will be talking about the conflicts in Gaza as well as Lebanon. And it's hard to tell, Errol, the message that President Biden might deliver, because he has been calling, along with other countries, for a ceasefire. Netanyahu has other plans, so it could be a forceful message from President Biden. But we'll have to see, Errol, because that call is supposed to happen sometime today, and we'll get you more on what they talked about on the back end.
All right, Weijia, we'll stay close to you for that. Thank you so much. Of course, we're staying on top of Hurricane Milton. Really, just hours to go before it makes landfall. Our teams are stationed across Florida to give you a live look at conditions. That's coming up. Now, this is important. The National Weather Service in Tampa says if Milton stays on its current path, which you see next to me, it could be the worst storm the city has seen in over a century. Now, I'm here because Vladimir Duthier is there. Joins me now live from Tampa. And Vlad, I've been seeing, as you've been interviewing people, some who've decided to ride this storm out, although folks are telling everyone to evacuate. What are you experiencing now, and what are locals telling you?
Right. So, Errol, the interview that you're referencing is with a man named Joseph Malinowski. He goes by the name Jay. We met him yesterday afternoon on a little tiny sailboat, which you can see, which is not far from me in Hillsborough Bay. He rode out Hurricane Helene 2 weeks ago, and he says he slept through it. And he told me that his intention was to ride out Hurricane Milton, despite, as you know, the evacuation warnings that have gone out from everyone, from the president of the United States to the governor of Florida to the mayor of this city, Tampa. Now, in just the last hour or so, police officials from the city of Tampa have approached Mr. Malinowski, and they've tried to convince him not to stay on his boat. Sounds like he is potentially thinking about that because, as you know, Errol, this storm is still on track to be a Category 5 storm when it makes landfall. The danger and the vulnerability for the city of Tampa is storm surge. We're talking potentially storm surge of up to 15 feet. In my discussions yesterday with the mayor of Tampa, she told me if you decide to stay and risk your life in this storm by staying in your home, especially if you're in one of these homes that we were visiting yesterday, which are on the ground level of condo units, you are in danger. You will probably lose your life. She said, and I'm quoting, that will be your coffin. And so people have been evacuating. But one of the things that struck me, Errol, as we were making our way around Tampa yesterday was a number of piles of debris that we saw scattered in many of the communities here in Tampa and in St. Petersburg, Florida. And what that means is when when those potentially enormous wind gusts pick up, we're talking anywhere from 50 to 100-mile-an-hour wind gusts. When those wind gusts pick up, those pieces of debris, that pile of debris, is going to become lethal. They have the potential to become projectiles that smash into people's homes, smash into people's windows. They become themselves deadly weapons. And so that struck me right off the bat when I saw that. And, of course, just being on the water here and seeing the potential for flooding in this city, it's going to be horrific if the storm continues on its current path, Errol.
Vlad, you're no stranger to dangerous conditions as a longtime correspondent, but I just have to say it's eerie to see you at 10:30 in the morning and we're watching the sky get darker around you as this storm approaches you and the team. Please, of course, stay safe. We know you know how to do that, and we appreciate that update. Vlad, thank you very much. And we also want to mention this. Cities along Florida's Atlantic coast are bracing for the impact of Hurricane Milton. And Daytona Beach, we understand, has already issued curfews and set up shelters. There's one other piece of information just coming into our newsroom, which is that the National Weather Service now has confirmed a tornado in Broward County. Just one of the aspects of danger that this storm is bringing. CBS News correspondent Tom Hansen joins us now from Daytona Beach. Give us an update on conditions there, Tom.
Yeah, hey there, Errol. Well, as you can look out into the ocean, you can see that the surf is getting choppier and choppier, but this is nowhere close to what it's going to look like in about 12 hours. That is when the storm will start to hit this area. We will see impacts. And I want to mention one of the impacts that has authorities on high alert here. It's those wind speeds that you mentioned and the potential for these storms to spawn tornadoes, one that we have actually already seen in Broward County. And if you can pull up an image of that, I don't know if we have that, but that is a massive tornado that is tearing through communities there. People are being told to shelter in place. One thing I want to point out, I'm looking at the evacuation orders map on the Atlantic side right now. 3 counties are in red, which means that there are mandatory evacuations in place. St. John's, Flagler, and Volusia, where we are in Daytona Beach. Now, these are a variety of evacuation orders that are mandatory for us. It's everyone who's toward the ocean, in between the Intercoastal Highway and the ocean. They are being told to evacuate immediately. That includes this territory right here. But if you think about a hurricane as a massive tornado in and of itself, and then spawning mini tornadoes all around, those are the conditions that people are going to face, not just on the coast, but also inland. The other thing I want to point out, and I know Vlad mentioned this very briefly, but a lot of people get hung up on the categories of these hurricanes. That is just tracking the wind speed. It's also important to keep in mind the storm surge that these coastal communities will face, in addition to those dangerous winds. Those are not factored into the category of the storm. So on this side of Florida, we are expecting to see what could be downgraded to a Category 1, but that does not eliminate the danger for the storm surge. And of course, any of these hurricanes can spawn those deadly tornadoes on a moment's notice. So officials we've spoken to say that it is important to heed these warnings, have your emergency alerts turned on your phone. You can go into your settings, scroll all the way down to local alerts and government alerts, and make sure all of those are flipped on if you are in the path of this storm. Errol?
And Tom, what's so important about everything you've just shared is you're on the east coast of Florida. So these are the conditions in Daytona, this tornado in Broward County, which is next to Miami. This is the, so to speak, safe side of the state. It really underscores that everyone in Central Florida and throughout the state needs to be overly cautious and heed the warnings. We really appreciate you joining us. And of course, you and the crew stay safe. Hurricane Milton shuttering businesses as well for some of Florida's biggest attractions, as you might imagine. CBS News national correspondent Manuel Bojorquez joins us now from Orlando. We are really crisscrossing the state this hour to show you the different impacts of this storm. Manuel, how is this hurricane already having an impact on what would be tourist destinations otherwise?
Well, Errol, this airport is usually teeming with people, families, children here for the theme parks. But if you look behind me, you can see the TSA line is empty. It's quite eerie to see this. We haven't seen it really since the COVID days. And that's because Orlando's International Airport has decided that at 8 a.m. Eastern this morning, they would cease operations and not reopen until it's safe to do so. The other situation here is people trying to get gas, trying to fuel up ahead of the storm. At last check, 17% of Florida's gas stations were without fuel. And in fact, last night we saw that Florida Highway Patrol was actually escorting tanker trucks to gas stations along the evacuation route to try to replenish the supply as people are still seeking higher ground. But the window to do that, of course, is closing. You mentioned the theme parks. Disney's theme parks here in Orlando will stop operations at 1 this afternoon. Universal and SeaWorld also adjusting their hours, and likely the parks will close all day tomorrow. So you have a combination here in Orlando of not only the residents, but also visitors who may have not been able to evacuate in time, and evacuees coming from the West Coast who are filling up the hotels and shelters here, fleeing the storm surge. But they will still feel the impacts of the hurricane, because when it comes to the Orlando area, if it keeps on its track and with the intensity, it could still be a Category 2 when it hits here. Errol?
That's right. And the wind, the storm surge, the after effects, the power outages, there's just so much to this that could put lives at risk. Manuel Bojorquez, thank you for that update. And of course, please stay safe. We now want to bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore following this storm. And I know that you want to break down for us, as part of what you're saying, the effect of storm surge as well and the waters.
Yeah, we'll talk about surge in just a second, and that's certainly the most concern with this storm as we go into the overnight hours into early tomorrow morning. Look, this storm, it's a good 210 miles away from Tampa Bay right now. But here's the thing, on that northeastern side of the storm, you see that threat for tornadoes, and we're starting to see that already develop this morning. In fact, already a confirmed tornado. We were just talking about it there in Broward County. Video and radar evidence showing that this storm produced a tornado. It was on the ground. It's tracking to the north up towards Palm Beach County, but there's also a couple of other tornado warnings here. Let me show you up towards Glades, Hendry, and Palm Beach County, an additional tornado warning. Concerned about this one. This one's showing quite a bit of rotation, and then a third tornado warning. So a lot going on in advance of the storm in the northeastern part of the storm as Milton tracks toward the coast. Again, biggest concern is going to be surge. We'll talk about that in just a few minutes, but we want to join in with live coverage of these tornadoes with CBS Miami. Here's the coverage.
Where there are folks indeed driving. I mean, we're in a state of emergency across the state of Florida right now. There are folks that are just traveling, evacuating because of Hurricane Milton. And we are going to continue to deal with the potential for more tornadoes like this to form. I mean, look at this image. This is incredible to see that clear view of the tornado. You can even see the debris at the bottom of the cyclone. And as we take a look, those clouds looking very dark and ominous. And you can see the cars driving by. I mean, you know, all depending on when it moved and crossed across Alligator Alley. Hopefully there was no one in its path. At least we don't know of yet any accidents, but we could see more of these tornadoes forming. And we're seeing the tornado warnings are in effect still for many parts of Broward County right now, the inland areas, right? We're talking about the Everglades. We can now under tornado warnings. Tropical storm warning too, by the way.
Was that the Miami feed or Miami?
CBS Miami reporting on the confirmed tornadoes in portions of Broward County. Meanwhile, a greater risk for tornadoes as Milton gets closer to the coast. You can see there across portions of central Florida, even up into portions of like Lakeland in Polk County, have a significant threat for these tropical tornadoes that tend to be relatively brief and relatively weak, but they can still certainly cause quite a bit of damage. And then, of course, you've got the big show with Hurricane Milton out to the south and west, already beginning to see near tropical storm force winds in Venice right now with those initial rain bands beginning to arrive. Looks like it makes landfall tonight, overnight, as a Category 4 hurricane. It traverses the peninsula as a hurricane, though weakening, and it'll then move into the Atlantic Ocean. Those tropical storm force winds extend out nearly 200 miles from the center of the storm, and at some point we'll start to see those tropical storm force winds nearly take over the entire state as those hurricane conditions arrive. And then the most immediate threat to life and property is going to be the storm surge. We've seen this shift slightly to the south a little bit, with the track shifting slightly to the south. Portions of Tampa Bay still potentially up to 12 feet of surge, but Errol, the big concern, I mean, 10 to 15 feet of surge. That's incredible. That could take out two-story homes, and that's why they're urging everyone to evacuate if there's still time, which, Errol, there is not a lot of time left. They're already beginning to see those tropical storm force winds arrive right now.
That's right, Grant, and I'm still stunned at that footage from the tornado in Broward County. You warned us that that could be part of this storm. We're seeing it already, and the hurricane has not made landfall yet. Grant, thank you very much. Still to come, there are concerns of price gouging as Hurricane Milton makes its way to Florida. We're going to speak with a business contributor, Javier David, about what's happening and what folks there can look out for. All right, we want to show you live storm coverage from our Tampa Bay affiliate, WTSP. Let's listen.
I haven't seen too much public transportation. I haven't seen much. It's just really, we'll see these little spurts of a lot of people hit the roads, but thankfully we are seeing them head out of the evacuation zones and heading more inland. We did see the National Guard out here. We have seen sheriff's deputies drive up and down the road. So if I know Uber is offering free rides, not sure how much longer that is going to happen, guys, because we are seeing those winds pick up. We are seeing, bridges getting ready to close. So if you are going to evacuate, you got to evacuate now, because like you see, time is running out as the rain just continues to come down here and that wind really starts to pick up.
And that's a location directly in the storm's track. We now want to discuss more of what she's just mentioned. While Uber may be offering free rides there, multiple companies are being accused of price gouging during these evacuations. Some users on social media platforms are noticing that prices for flights out of the state more than doubled in some cases compared to the typical price. And airlines aren't the only ones, allegedly. Some social media users reporting hotels significantly increasing their prices as well. Javier David is a CBS News business contributor and has more on this. Javier, I thought this was illegal. Have we seen this before? Help us understand what's happening.
Yeah, so look, this is not the popular answer, and I might get myself into trouble for saying it out loud, but what we've conditioned ourselves to believe is gouging really is simply market forces at work. It's why key staples like fuel, generators, water, food, in this case, plane tickets and hotels, because People are fleeing the zone, trying to get themselves out of danger. All of these prices shoot up during natural disasters because too many people want them. They're willing to pay more than usual to get them, and there's just not enough of them to go around.
Javier David, important to know that market forces are at work. Thank you very much. We will have the latest look at Hurricane Milton's track after this. Stay right there. All right, you really need to see this coverage from CBS News Miami. It's showing the tornado that touched down a short time ago in Broward County as Milton approaches.
You're waiting for something to come down, but nothing has, not seeing any crashes. So that's another facet of this. Because of the heavier traffic we've seen on that eastbound side, we haven't seen any spinouts, any crashes, or anything relating to this tornado as it moved across 75, Lisette.
Very fortunate that so far we haven't heard of any accidents or crashes. But at the same time, it is just frightening to see this. You know, this tornado that crossed I-75 14 miles west of Sunrise in rural Broward, west of Weston and I-75. You know, this is why we issue the tornado warnings, and the National Weather Service has issued a tornado watch, is due to the fact that these rain bands that are rolling through can become very dangerous quickly and spawn tornadoes.
Kat, we now want to check in. That's just stunning to watch. Let's check in with CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore. What strikes me about what they just said, Grant, is this tornado apparently crossed a highway. You just have so many dangers there for so many people. What are you seeing?
Exactly that, Errol. And it's almost cruel the way these tropical systems are, because the hurricane's still a good 200 miles off the coast of Tampa Bay, all right? Meanwhile, you've got tornado warnings that are building up on that northeastern fringe, almost coming into the area from the east, while you've got the more significant threat out to the west. You've got over 5 million people underneath the threat for tornadoes today before the worst of Hurricane Milton arrives later on tonight into early tomorrow morning. We're waiting for the 11 o'clock advisory from the National Hurricane Center, but the last update that we got basically just saying, look, this is still a very powerful and obviously potentially catastrophic hurricane. Category 4 strength, 155 mile per hour winds. It's moving to the northeast at 16 miles per hour. Let me show you some of those initial wind gusts that we're seeing on that one of those initial rain bands arriving along the southwestern coast of Florida. 38 mile per hour wind gusts right now in Venice. 39 mile per hour wind gust makes it tropical storm force, all right? Here comes the storm. It approaches landfall as we go into the overnight hours, likely as a low-end Category 4 hurricane, Errol. Surge, wind, tornado, and heavy rainfall. All those threats are a significant concern over the next 36 to 48 hours. Back to you.
Grant, thank you so much. You can all join me 7 a.m. on CBS News Mornings, but stay right here. Elizabeth Cook continues our coverage next.